Joining us now, Susan Glasser, staff writer at The New Yorker, and retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, former director of European Affairs for the National Security Council. He is also a senior advisor for Vote Vet. Susan, I want to start with you because I love reading me some Susan Glasser. And your newest is Trump's self-owned summit with Putin. Your it is not on this, but it says even the subhead, thank you. Even the puffery-prone president can alchemize his non-deal with Russia into Trumpian gold. And one poll quote that we have, nothing says standing up to Russian aggression quite like welcoming the aggressor on a red carpet and applauding him. Tell folks what you think of what you thought about what you saw last night.
Well, you know, it's interesting, Eugene, when the summit started, right, and we didn't understand what exactly was going to happen behind closed doors. You know, I thought even by Trump's standards to welcome the accused war criminal and sanctioned Vladimir Putin to the United States for the first time in a decade, well, that's bad enough. But you can see, OK, Trump can justify that in terms of, you know, the larger goal of peace. But when I saw from the get-go that Trump was going to welcome him, not only with the full red carpet, literally applauding, Vladimir Putin, I thought, you know, I could be wrong, but this is probably going to be the indelible image of the summit. You know, 5 years from now, it may not have any larger historical resonance depending on what happens later with Ukraine. But we're always going to remember that Donald Trump clapped for Vladimir Putin as the first greeting between the two men since Putin launched his invasion of Ukraine. And I think that held up. You know, there were no questions at the press conference, so it's not going to be a memorable exchange at the press conference. Yeah. So that's one takeaway. And then the other takeaway, I think, is very clear, which is that even the hype machine, Donald Trump, couldn't spin this into a great success. And if you listen to his long interview with Sean Hannity, I'm not recommending that necessarily. It was 35 minutes of blah, 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 blah. And that was the tell. Even Trump couldn't rationalize it. He talked about everything under the sun except for Russia. And of course, then overnight, we get the real news, which is that Donald Trump has abandoned the very position he's been holding to for the last 6 months, which is that there needs to be an immediate ceasefire. As recently as the Air Force One plane ride to Alaska, Trump says there needs to be an immediate ceasefire, and I'm really hoping to get that today, and I'll be really upset if I don't. Overnight, he says, never mind about that, and adopts Vladimir Putin's position that there should actually be work on a longer-term peace deal instead of a ceasefire. So we'll probably find out more concessions that Trump was talking with Putin about. It's early yet in terms of the reporting.
And Colonel Vindman, I mean, the thing here is in the clip that we showed from President Trump's interview with Sean Hannity, he says, basically, it's up to President Zelensky. It's up to the Ukrainian president to come up with a deal. And I raise that because Russia Today, RT, is reporting, and I'll put this headline up, Zelensky's exclusion from Alaska summit, proof of his illegitimacy. And it has this quote from this man named Miroshnik, who is identified. He serves as the Russian Foreign Ministry's ambassador at large for the Kyiv regime's war crimes. That is his title. And here's what he said. As a leader of Ukraine, as he calls himself, Zelensky is unacceptable. He cannot sign anything. So that's what the Russians think about President Zelensky. Meanwhile, the president of the United States says the only way this can end is if President Zelensky comes up with the solution. Which, how are you reading that? To me, it says there is no end in sight.
There's absolutely no end in sight. I think yesterday was a pretty significant setback. And we actually know more about what happened from that meeting, not from the U.S. side, because there was no deliverable, no PR win, but frankly, from the Russian side. Dmitry Medvedev, part of the inner circle of Vladimir Putin and former president, put out 5 points that he tallied as kind of the successes. The first one was restoring those bilateral contacts between the leadership of Russia and Ukraine calmly and without ultimatums and threats, meaning no accountability for Putin being a war criminal indicted by the or a warrant for him by the International Criminal Court. The second point was no preconditions for ending the conflict. So no ceasefire, security guarantees, nothing that was a former position of the administration of the Europeans. He then talks about no pressure coming out of this in this meeting that took less than 3 hours. Frankly, if you think about the fact that each side had a translator, it was really about a 90-minute meeting. And out of that, no escalation of pressure for the foreseeable future. And then that negotiations are going to occur without preconditions and with the continuation of Russia's war. So no ceasefire again. And the last thing that I thought was interesting is back on Ukraine, that it's in Ukraine's core, as if it's Ukraine that could somehow end this war. And the only way they could is if they completely capitulate instead of Russia ending the war, terminating the war of aggression. So in reality, this is the Russians got exactly what they wanted. Trump completely backpedaled on this, looked extremely weak, not just to Russia, but to our allies and to other adversaries around the world. And this whole idea of a deal maker, day one or any other day, is just a non-starter since the war is actually accelerating under his watch. So pretty awful outcome. And now we have Zelensky coming to town on Monday, probably to get berated for not accepting capitulation.
We should also say they canceled the working lunch, the expanded bilateral that they were supposed to have with the Secretary of State, and all those folks were going to be there. Susan, one of the things about Donald Trump, and you know this, is that no matter how something goes, he calls it a success, no matter what the facts show. And then his team runs out and they talk to all of us and they say that that's what happens, that it was a success. When they walk into the room where the press is, they're smiling and they look all happy. That's not what happened. Yesterday, when I texted with reporters that were there in the room in Alaska, and they saw senior advisors coming in. One described as folks looking at ashen and concerned and a little bit confused. And they have yet to, that I've seen, you tell me if I'm wrong, talk about how successful this summit was. What does that tell you about what they think about how it went and what they think about what we're going to see Monday and then beyond?
I think we're going to move on pretty quickly from this. Donald Trump is not big on admitting failure. And so the fact that he's not even trying very hard to spin this into some kind of golden, gilded Nobel Peace Prize worthy outcome, I think is very, very revealing. Yeah. And to contrast that with what you're hearing from Moscow this morning, the Russians are positively effusive about the outcomes of the summit. In fact, crowing in almost Trumpian terms of notice was, I believe, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson talking about the beautiful red carpet that greeted Putin. It's that indelible image that Russia itself is now eager to reinforce. It's the physical representation of Donald Trump's enormous concession to Vladimir Putin, the ending of international isolation. That's more valuable in many ways to Russia than lifting a number of the sanctions. And I would point out, by the way, that Donald Trump again and again and again has said that if Putin did not meet his deadlines and did not agree to a ceasefire and to come to the table, that he was going to impose these sanctions. Trump's Russian supporters and cheerleaders on Capitol Hill have claimed again and again without evidence that Donald Trump was any minute now going to endorse a bill that is supported by more than 80 senators. It's very hard to get more than 80 senators literally to support anything in Washington right now. And, Trump's GOP supporters in Washington have said, oh, yes, just wait one second, and then Donald Trump is going to impose sanctions. Before the summit, they said, if it doesn't go well, if Putin doesn't agree to Trump's terms, then he's going to talk about sanctions. And last night on Hannity, did you hear Donald Trump talk about sanctions? No, you did not. And I think, I wish that everybody who spent the last few months telling us how Donald Trump is really going to get tough on Vladimir Putin and how he's really changed his position this time. And lots of people I know who are credible people, they, of course, want a good outcome here. I understand that. It's a horrible grinding war. But, it's important at this point to be reality-based about Donald and Vladimir Putin. And I do wish that people would just retract all of those endless think pieces and commentary about how, Donald Trump has really changed his tune about Putin. And my view is that in the coming days, we're going to find out a lot more about what Trump said and did behind the scenes in that summit with Putin. And I don't think that it was talking tough and representing the concerns of Ukraine and our Western allies.